So we're going to call the meeting to order. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Agenda changes. Under items for consent agenda, there was a revision to the August 18th board minutes to reflect Beth Lingerman as an abstention following the personnel report. Also under items for board action, there is the addition of H, approval to amplify K, 8, science digital subscription. And under the personnel report, E, appointments, there was the addition to instructional substitutes, column G, number 4. Okay, thank you. Did not receive any public comments. Are there any communications? No. Okay, board and staff reports. Ms. Linderman, take it from the top again.
Okay. So the Finance, Audit, and Facilities Committee met tonight, right before this meeting. The business office has been really busy. The draft of our internal audit was received this afternoon, so we'll get more information about that forthcoming. And the external audit is still in process with a target date of October 6th for the board to receive that report. Planning for a potential state aid reduction is underway. Obviously, it's a moving target, but 20% of our budget is approximately $8 million, so we need to be thinking about how we will manage that, whether it's a cash flow issue or whether we get some or none of it back through federal programs. So the office is looking at strategies of how we can manage the short and longer term impacts of that kind of reduction. The Smart Schools update touched on some smaller details, change order at Knickerbocker, but also highlighted that the phone system is just about ready to be installed with a Columbus Day target for that. Entrance and security upgrades. There's going to be a walkthrough tomorrow starting at North and going through the buildings that have been affected by that, which is most of our facilities. And so that's good to have that work done before students start using the building again. For our future capital project, we've had ongoing discussion as a board about this. Things have been moved back for a variety of reasons, obviously, but we will continue to review that for to make sure that the priorities are still in place. Things that absolutely have to be done will be part of that project, and we'll look at the cost of that, how that compares to numbers that we might originally have been looking at. And then finally, we did get an update about the pool and the absolute necessity to get repairs done before that can be used.
Thank you. Moving on to items for consent agenda. Resolved that the consent agenda items A, B, C, D, and E are hereby approved. Can I have a motion, please?
Michael.
And a second?
Colleen.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Items for board action. Whereas the Board of Education has been authorized by the voters at the annual Board of Education meeting to raise the current budget of the 2020-21 school year to a sum not to exceed $77,006,009. Therefore, be it resolved that the board fix the equalized tax rates by towns and confirm the extension of the taxes as they appear on the following described tax roll. And be it hereby directed that the tax warrant of this board duly signed shall be affixed to the above referenced tax rolls authorizing the collection of said taxes to begin October 1, 2020 and end December 1, 2020. giving the tax warrant an effective period of 62 days, at the expiration of which time the tax collector shall make an accounting in writing to the board. And it is further directed that the delinquent tax penalty shall be fixed as follows. First month fee period, October 1 through November 5, 2020. Second month interest of 2% added November 6 through December 1, 2020. After December 1, 2020, unpaid taxes will be turned over to the city for city properties and to the county for county properties. Additional interest will be added. Be it resolved as follows. To the collector of the Watertown City School District, City of Watertown, Towns of Luray, Amelia, Rutland, and Watertown, County of Jefferson, New York State. You are hereby commanded, number 1, to give notice and start collection on October 1, 2020, in accordance with the provisions of the section 1322 of the real property tax law, to give notice that tax collection will end on December 1, 2020, to collect taxes in the sum of $16,007,870.71 in the same manner that collectors are authorized to collect city, town, and county taxes in accordance with the provisions of section 1318 of the real property tax law. Number 4, to make no changes or alterations in the tax warrant or the attached tax rolls, but shall return the same to the Board of Education. The board may recall its warrant and tax roll for the correction of errors or omissions in accordance with the provisions of section 1316 of the real property tax law.
Could I get a motion, please? And a second.
Jason.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Whereas the Board of Education has been authorized by the voters at the annual Board of Education meeting to raise for the Flower Memorial Library in the 2020-21 school year a sum not to exceed $75,000. Therefore, be it resolved that the board fix the equalized tax rates by towns and confirm the extension of the taxes as they appear on the following described library tax roll. And be it hereby directed that the tax warrant of this board, duly signed, shall be affixed to the above referenced library tax rolls, authorizing the collection of said library taxes to begin October 1, 2020, and end December 1, 2020, giving the tax warrant an effective period of 62 days, at the expiration of which time the tax collector shall make an accounting in writing to the board. And it is further directed that the delinquent tax penalties shall be fixed as follows. First month free period, October 1 to November 5th, 2020. Second month interest of 2% added November 6th to December 1st, 2020. After December 1st, 2020, unpaid taxes will be turned over to the city for city properties and to the county for county properties. Additional interest will be added. Be it resolved as follows. To the collector of the Watertown City School District, City of Watertown, Towns of Luray, Amelia, Rutland, and Watertown, County of Jefferson, New York State. You are hereby commanded, number 1, to give notice and start collection on October 1, 2020, in accordance with the provisions of section 1322 and 1324 of the real property tax law. Number 2, to give notice that tax collection will end on December 1, 2020. Number 3, to collect taxes in the total sum of $75,000 in the same manner that the collectors are authorized to collect school, city, town, and county taxes in accordance with the provisions of section 1318 of the real property tax law. And number 4, to make no changes or alterations in the tax warrant or the attached tax rolls, but shall return the same to the Board of Education. The board may call its warrant impactual for corrections of errors or omissions in accordance with the provisions of Section 1316 of the real property tax law.
I have a motion, please.
Coley.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Resolved that the creation of a Director of Technology, Cybersecurity, and Innovation position as recommended by Patricia B. LeBar, Superintendent of Schools, is hereby approved.
Can I get a motion, please?
Jason.
And a second?
Susie?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Resolved that upon recommendation of Superintendent of Schools, Jeffrey Wood be approved for an exempt appointment in the title of Director of Technology, Cybersecurity, and Innovation under the rules of the Watertown City Civil Service, subject to the final approval of the New York State Civil Service Authority pursuant to the requirements of Civil Service Law, Section 61, and consistent with the terms of the employment agreement.
Can I get a motion, please?
Second.
Michael and Beth. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, Patricia B. LeBar, the Board of Education hereby approves the following: retirement, resignations, appointments, probationary, instructional, term non-probationary, non-instructional, temporary, non-instructional, part-time, instructional substitutes, non-instructional substitute, coaching, fall rules.
Can I get a motion, please?
Susie?
And a second?
Jason.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Resolved that change order number 08, Continental Construction, to provide 32 additional removable lock set cores compatible with owner's keying system for the schedule of locks tagging to be per RFP 1-008 for $6,145 is hereby.
Can I get a motion, please?
Coley.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Is this a change that we had asked for?
This is the change so that we have a lot of master keys in the district, so yes, this is what you're asking for, we'll be taking care of.
Okay. Anybody else, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Whereas on July 7th, August 4th, August 18th, and September 1, 2020, prior to the beginning of the season, the board appointed individuals to serve as coaches for the fall 2020 athletic season, and whereas a result of various executive orders and declarations of emergency, schools were closed effective March 14th, 2020, and whereas schools are tentatively scheduled to reopen as of September 2020, and whereas fall athletic seasons did not begin prior to school closure, and fall 2020 extracurricular athletics are not occurring during the period of the school closure, and whereas it is unknown whether there will be a fall 2020 athletic season given the indefinite duration of school closure, and whereas the district wishes to ensure coaches are compensated on a prorated basis for a portion of the fall 2020 extracurricular athletic season for which students participate in athletics, but that coaches do not receive compensation for services that are not provided in the event that there is no student participation in the fall 2020 athletic seasons. And whereas the board recognizes that coaches receive a longevity stipend based upon the number of years of service an individual has served as a coach. Now, therefore, it is resolved, number one, in the event that students participate in extracurricular athletics for the portion of the fall 2020 athletic season, coaching stipends will be prorated to reflect the duration of the fall 2020 athletic season, and coaches shall receive longevity credit for their service during the fall 2020 athletic season. In the event that the students do not participate in any portion of what would have been the fall 2020 athletic season, all coaches' appointments for the fall 2020 athletic season are deemed rescinded, and no stipend shall be paid. Coaches shall not receive longevity credit for the fall 2020 athletic season.
And get a motion, please.
So moved.
In a second?
Michael.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Resolve the 3-year digital subscription for Science K-8 to Amplify is hereby approved.
Can I get a motion, please?
Susie?
And a second?
Cohen.
Jason, first I heard, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And that is the end of the resolution. Okay. We're up to the superintendent's report.
It's been incredibly busy here the past few weeks, and when we think about leaving, unexpectedly in March and closing down schools and then, being closed for the remainder of that year, we knew then that when we reopened schools, it would become a very heavy lift. And so we've been preparing for that since March, but as the days approach and get closer and, having some of our welcome back meetings with staff, we obviously have had to look at things in a total different light. So today we met with our aides first. So again, we're keeping crowds of less than 50. And then we met with our assistants and we went over, our welcome back message. We talked about employee recognition. Tomorrow we meet with, we actually recorded after the meetings this morning. And so we'll virtually meet with the rest of the crowd, but Stacy, Tina, and I will divide and we'll conquer and we'll go out and meet the staff in the various buildings. But we also would like to continue to do some of the things that we used to do in the past. So employee recognition is a big deal in the Watertown City School District. And we acknowledge and give people service pins for every 5 years that they're in the district. So tomorrow during staff meetings, people that have been here between 5 and 30 years will receive those pins. This afternoon, I delivered a 35-year pin to Jerry Luffman, who's a custodian at Case, and Principal Taylor and I thanked him for his years of service in the district, and we, honored him with the pin. Tomorrow, I will be visiting IHC and honoring Maggie Harbison, who's an RN at IHC, and acknowledging her 40 years in the district. And then I'll also be headed over to Starbucks to meet with Mike Knowlton, who's a custodian there, and honoring him as well for his 40 years of service. So one thing we did a little bit differently this year is we looked at the #1 hits for each one of those years, starting at 25 years, and just played a little snippet of that music, because it's very difficult, and meeting with people in a virtual format and to try to get through a lot of the business that we normally would do in person and that excitement. So we're hoping that the music that's shared with them will provide a little inspiration for them along the way. And then Tina did the health and safety protocols and just gave a very general overview of that. Stacy followed up on the importance of instruction, what it looks like, and a lot of things that have been put in place to support moving forward. We learned so much from March to June, and part of the message today was really we think about daylight savings, and we always talk about fall back, spring ahead, but think back to this past spring where we feel like we kind of kept going back. We would do something and then we would get a different directive from the state or the health department and we'd have to change things up. So our motto, if you will, for this fall is fall forward, and to continue to move forward throughout this fall, because there will be things that will be difficult along the way. We're learning from colleges that are reopening and schools in the southern part of the country where they're opening and they're having to close. Our goal is to keep things safe for our students. Again, we've worked very hard with our reopening plans. I would commend all of the building leadership for having the virtual meetings for families to tune into. So they did a K-4 meeting, and then there was one for Wiley, Case, in the high school. and the leadership teams in each one of those buildings, just explained what it would look like on a given day and some of the things that you need to do throughout the day. But there are a lot of other details, such as, you know, if you're a kindergarten parent and your child is coming to school for the first time, or even if your child is in K-4, you always get that experience to come and meet the teacher, you know, sometimes ahead of time, and this year looks a lot different. So if you go to our website under each school, each staff in K-4, they've done an introduction to the kindergarten teachers and the first grade teachers, so that families can take a look and see, you know, this will be my child, depending on if you're in the hybrid model or you're remote. You know, if you're a complete remote student, you still want to put a name with a face. So we're hoping, we keep thinking of things that parents have questions about, or when parents ask us the questions. This is all new to every one of us. So we try to figure out ways to take that little extra stress off wherever we can. Parent Square is another tool that we're onboarding with, and that process has been extremely difficult, but Lisa Blank also this morning did a little portion for the faculty, and that will be shared tomorrow. And then there will be more follow-up, but there's great information on the website about Parent Square. And as we move forward with that, I think it will put us all in a better place for communication, one-stop shop, but it's a growing pain. It's something new, and we're doing a lot of things differently and new all at the same time. So it's just one step more to take on and try to get it right, so that parents do feel like the communication, they're getting it very quickly. The code of conduct, as you know, with the Attorney General's letter, that was one of the things that we were asked to review. So I have reached out to several stakeholders in the community and in the district to start that review. And I'll have preliminary results back by this Friday, and then I'll be able to share with you at the next board meeting what that looks like as far as any revisions that we may need to do before we forward on the revised copy to the Attorney General for approval. And then once they approve it, then I'll be asking the board to approve it as well. Let's see. I met with the new teachers. Stacy did an incredible job having the new teachers come in for a few days, and I don't want to steal her thunder because I'm sure she's going to report out on that. But my portion of it was to go over the district safety plan. And, you know, that looks very different than it has in the past, because right now, and coming up in one of the next board meetings, we'll do a public hearing on our district safety plan. We plan to get that district-wide safety team together on September 16th and take a look at the current plan that we have for the district, but then adding in, like last summer, we added in a whole piece on cybersecurity. This year, we'll add in some of our COVID, our reopening plan to that as well. So we'll have that to share out with the board coming up soon. Tomorrow I'm meeting, when I go to Starbucks, I also have Informed Northern New York coming by, and we're going to do a segment with Parent Square and the COVID screening that parents will need to do. So more information coming out on that. I really love the way all of our local media sources are reaching out and working with us to get information out to the community. It's been great all the way around. We've had a lot of good information that's being shared. And then from that, you know, if people have questions, they reach out to me, and we're able to do some follow-up stories to some questions that may come as a result of that. And then the last thing that came out today, where you may have heard the federal government talking about looking at our feeding in our schools as we did for summer feeding, like we were allowed to do back in the spring. And as you know, Watertown City School District having the community eligibility provision, that allows us to serve free breakfast and free lunch. But as we started the school, we would have to approach it a little bit differently than we did in the spring. In the spring, under the summer feeding guidelines, any person in the community 18 and under could just come in and, you know, pick up meals. So we're working with Mr. Orvis on the finer details of that, but one thing that we're going to do a little bit differently is through our Parent Square app. We're going to have parents pre-order either a 3-meal or a 5-meal, and he did a really nice job, he and Mary Hughes both, explained that process in the Wiley meeting the other night. And so that will give us an accurate count, of what we'll need, but also knowing that with this newness out there, with going back to summer feeding, that all students would be eligible. I think for us, it said until December or until the money ran out. Again, we're in a little bit different position than other districts with community eligibility provision, but I think that we still need to have a structure in place, because that's something that we learned from March through the end of the year. We were always prepared, but the numbers fluctuated, so this will help us prepare those meals that are needed. And of course, the food service staff have just been incredible throughout this whole time period. I acknowledged this morning that they served, I think, 177,813 meals since March. And that's, if you think about that amount of work, and then all of the other stakeholders in the district that leaned in to support food service, it has been truly incredible to see the amount of work that everybody has taken from food service. And you hate to mention one group and not another, because I think about payroll and the business department, and there are so many things where the wheels just kept going, and then sometimes it felt like our wheels were falling off with some of the directives that we were given from state ed and the health department, and then we'd have to just kind of pull back and put things together. So I'm looking forward to a great start of the school year, and I'm hoping that we'll see what next week brings.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum.
So, as Patty mentioned, a lot of my time lately has been dealing with Parent Square and fixing issues in School Tool. But outside of that, we had a really great new staff orientation over the last week and a half. Everybody who provided a presentation or presentations, I want to thank. And there were probably too many names to list, and I'll miss somebody, but I just really appreciate all of the support with that. Got a lot of great feedback from the new staff who felt that the day really provided them with all of the essentials that they needed to know to start the school year. Learning about the district initiatives, we provided them with some presentations on the 5 E's of learning and how to incorporate technology and databases into that. PBIS and the Positivity Project. We did the bus tour again this year and practiced social distancing and mask wearing ourselves on the bus. So that was really nice. And got a lot of information from the bus driver, who was a native of Northern New York, Watertown, his entire life. So he had a lot of the backstory on each of the buildings as we went around, which is really great to have. Outside of that, a couple of instructional updates that I just want to make you aware of. We did send out a full instructional update last week to all staff. And in there were some just general classroom expectations for the year about keeping consistency across the board. And so not only consistency for our families and our students, but also consistency in helping our staff set boundaries so that their self-care is also valued and protected. So hopefully that will provide some leverage across the board for getting the school year off to a really positive start. We are asking staff through the first couple of weeks of school to not just dive right into Unit 1 of their curriculum, but to really take some time and think about, students have been out of school for 6 months almost, and some of them during the closure between March and June connected very little, if at all. And so we really need to have a good understanding of where they're coming from emotionally and as well as academically. So giving ourselves a chance to use our curricular stance to figure out a baseline of where kids are at and then take it from there with our curriculum. So we're not just diving right in. Our instructional coaches and very likely our technology integration specialists this year are actually going to be creating assignments for themselves to be in the buildings every week. So for example, the instructional coaches have already done this and shared it across the K-6 buildings, which they are typically just, give me a call and I'll be there as soon as you need me. We only hit some of the teachers in that facet, so we're constantly tweaking it and trying to make it better. This year, each of the coaches will be assigned to 2 of the buildings, and they'll alternate weeks there. So one coach will spend a week at North and then go to Starbucks for a week and then come back to North. And that way we'll hopefully be able to make connections with a greater number of teachers across the board. We are working on training. You approved the Amplify Science curriculum, so I really appreciate that. It'll be very helpful to our teachers. We haven't had an updated science curriculum in years, as I mentioned last meeting, so this is going to be very helpful. And in addition to getting that off the ground, we have trainings coming up on things like Go Guardian, and obviously the Empower Hours that Lisa Blank and her team supports are going to be extremely helpful to our staff in getting things off the ground. Lastly, on Monday, we submitted our Title 1, 2, 3, and 4 application, as well as our school improvement grant for the district and for CASE. So hopefully we'll be hearing approval on those shortly. And next meeting, just to keep you in the loop, Food for Families is going to be taking place this year. We typically start in the 3rd week of September. Our goal is to do that in the same respect this year. So I'll have a better update for you at our next meeting with that.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent for Personnel.
So the Personnel Office has been incredibly busy as well over the last couple of weeks since we last met. As you can see, you had approved many positions tonight. We are interviewing. We have some openings still remaining, so we're interviewing this week for those, and also for long-term sub positions. I met with turning to the return to school, been very busy with working with staff on accommodation requests. So there is paperwork that we send out if the staff member requests an accommodation or accommodations to return to school in the fall. There's a series of paperwork that they need to fill out, and then we engage in a discussion with them on what they need. There's been some great discussions back and forth to try to meet the needs of the staff member and also to balance that with the students in the district. So we've had several meetings with teachers and staff members regarding accommodations and visiting buildings, looking at office spaces, clinic spaces, to make sure there's social distancing taking place in each of those areas. Working closely with the Jefferson County Department of Public Health as well. I just wanted to share with the board, we've been repeating this early and often with our staff, is that a lot of what we do here with COVID, we are regulated by the Jefferson County Department of Public Health, and that comes from contact tracing to identifying positive cases. We are a conduit for communication with them, but they're the ones who make the decisions on quarantine times and things like that. So, in fact, we had a question last Sunday. I called last Sunday at 11 a.m. And a nurse who is adept at COVID answered my question. It was regarding just something in general. So they're there 7 days a week. They've been very responsive to our questions, and they'll continue to be great resources as we move forward. Very excited. We're doing 3 professional development days, of course, actually 4. And we have next Tuesday, Stacy and I will be doing training with our substitutes so that they're clued in on what we're doing with our health and safety protocols and instruction. That's everything from food service to maintenance custodial, to our sub nurses, to our sub teachers. So we've sent invitations to those folks. They'll be coming in. So when they're ready to sub, they'll know what to do when they come into the building, just like our teachers and the rest of our staff members do as well. So that'll be next Tuesday. We've put out the training videos a little bit early this year. New York State mandates us to do training, required training, everything from dignity for all students to sexual harassment to right to know the bloodborne pathogens. There's also a series of videos related to COVID this year, everything from hand washing to temperature taking to PPE. So we're trying to certainly educate our staff on those areas, and we'll continue to show those videos during our upcoming professional development days. And I'd just like to echo, Stacy did a wonderful job with new teacher orientation last week and into this week. I did a presentation on APPR to our new teachers, and there's be some new information on APPR coming out, but again, it was my pleasure to see everybody. We interviewed people on Zoom, so it was nice to see everybody in person last week and this week too. So we're very excited to get the school year started and to wrap up the interviews this week as well.
Janie, can you give the board just an indication of what the changes could be in APPR that are coming up?
Yes, absolutely. So we're meeting with the teachers union regarding APPR. One of the things that we're very excited about is typically each teacher has to come up with his or her own goal, and we do a pre-assessment and a post-assessment every year. New York State 3012D, the law, says that we can do a district goal. So what we're working on now is taking an average of 4 Regents exams and having a K through 12 SLO, student learning objective, and basing everybody's score on that, those 4 Regents exams. So no more pre-assessments and post-assessments. We'll simply write a district SLO goal, and then they'll be based on the Regents exam. Stacy put together some cumulative data over the last few years for the union so they could see the average. We're looking at Algebra 1, U.S. History and Government, English, and what was the 4th one?
Living environment.
Living Environment, LE. So the average of those 4 Regents exams every year. The state does tell us in our reopening plan that we have to come up with a backup to that in case there are no Regents exams, so we need to work through that process. But it's a lot simpler, and we don't have to spend the time giving the pre-assessments involved. We can just get right to instruction. So we're having a nice dialogue with our union on that as well. So does anybody have any questions on that process?
Thank you. And school business manager.
That kind of covered some of that stuff with, from FAF, you know, our audits. We did just receive the prelim draft on the internal audit. External audit is still wrapping up. I think they have pretty much everything they need now. We do have all their journal entries in, so now we can begin working on ST3 and all of our SAMS reporting that is technically due tomorrow, but that's unlikely. As it is with virtually every school in New York State, as long as we're in before the end of the month, we're in good standing. And continuing to work on capital funding for future projects. I mean, there's been a ton of stuff submitted so far. I think we touched on transparency and CARES last time. And we also received one on the Ohio coming out of transparency. Ohio school is listed as an underfunded high needs school. And the way we budgeted this year kind of sought equity throughout the district, so it kind of narrowed that gap from over $5,000 between our high and low school down to, I think it's around $2,300 is the gap now. So Stacy was a big help there, and we were able to get that in. Otherwise, just continuing to work on trying to figure out what's going to happen with state aid, how we can work with our revenues versus what we plan on spending and the increased costs.
Do we have an idea when the CARES money should come through, have they said?
No, but it's, what is it, 20%? I think right up front that you get, and then the rest will be just like the federal. You have to get reimbursed for the rest of it.
Okay. All right. Some upcoming dates, so school is officially opening next Wednesday, September 9th, which is a remote day for all students in the district. And then A through H is coming in person on Thursday, and I through Z is coming in person on Friday. And then our first policy meeting is next Friday as well for the year. And then our next board meeting is September 15th here at Wiley. Can we anticipate that all meetings are going to be at Wiley for further notice?
I would say yes to that, because if we're gonna virtually stream, and just with the technical difficulties that we've experienced the last 2 times, let's keep it here
Okay.
Until further notice, and then we'll go from there.
Is there a way that we could invite the principals whose schools we were supposed to be at for the second meeting to come and just
Yes.
talk to us about how things are going at their schools?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm gonna go around the table if anyone has anything to add. I'm gonna start with you, Beth.
Well, I actually was going to ask a question about where things stand on the various entities that we're working on donating supplies to students. You know, now that the lists are out and parents are thinking about shopping, you know, what can they expect?
So I was at Case this morning or this afternoon, and thanks to Tina, I think Fort Drum reached out to you, and there is an abundance of school supplies right in the entryway at Case. As far as K6 goes, we received Friday a shipment from Staples, and we're going through the process of sorting that out and then dividing that equally amongst the 4. And then there was one more.
Community broadcasters?
Yeah, the community broadcast.
They have not reached back out to us yet, so we're not sure with community broadcasters. And I actually heard another one through another local media that they're working on, but I have not specifically heard from them. So I know that there are some other things that are happening in the community, because you're right, Beth, a lot of parents are wondering what to do about school supplies, and it's our hope that we have school supplies for each child that's in person, but also that we're able to, if parents that are remote only, that we would be able to somehow support that need as well.
Great. Thanks.
Jason, any?
No.
Michael? Susie? Cole?
So,
Okay, we have need for an executive session for the purposes of discussing a pending legal action, so if I could get a motion for that, please.
Chloe.
Susie, thank you, as a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and we'll go into executive session.
I don't feel like it worked.
Okay.
For whatever reason, it's not connecting to the internet, so it'll send in the morning when I start the computer. See you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. All right, can I get a motion to end the meeting, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Michael?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Have a good week, guys. Good night, everybody.